And everything should be worked through you here. You're the king. Everyone, you've expanded your reign, you've put leaders over, but something needs to bring everyone back to you in some way, shape, or form. And they play to the king's pride and his glory. And then they use the Persian law against Daniel. Because once the king puts an order in place, it cannot be revoked. It cannot be undone. And it works. The laws that clearly oppose the law of God should not be obeyed. Acts 5:29. First Peter says, we must obey God rather than men. The people of God are called to holiness and faithfulness. If a government power requires something, as in the case of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or they prohibit something, as is the case in Daniel here, that goes, if they require something or they prohibit something that is central to our faith and holiness, then we must not obey our human authorities. To put it quite frankly, their authority is outranked. We submit to God and Him alone. His law reigns over all other laws that might come. And so Daniel here hears this prohibition. You have to pray to King Darius, and Daniel's like, that law does not conform to the law of God, and I am going to be true to my devotion and allegiance to God. Now, just a caution here. I do think it's important that we not let our individual selves determine what is central to our faith and holiness. For example, I've seen churches split because some members thought the color of the carpet was central to their faith and holiness. And they did not approve of the church leadership's decision to change it. So we got to be careful that we don't individualize our faith to where whatever we think is central is clearly the case. Governments will make bad decisions and bad laws. There will be ramifications and negative consequences. It will take wisdom and humility to navigate our world of exile. But my encouragement to us as God's people here in this time and place is let's do it together, right? Let's discover what faithfulness to God is together as we exist in a world where people who are in power and might make laws might do so contrary to the law of God. And let's figure this out together. Let's work through these questions together. That's an important part of the unity of the church and striving for peace and seeking to be faithful to God. We should enter into grace-filled discussions with our church community, our elders, and church history to determine what Scripture lays out as central to faith and holiness. Because if something comes down the pipeline that is contrary to our devotion to God, we're going to remain devoted to God because He's the one who has our ultimate allegiance. Daniel was in the same boat, and look what he does. Verse 10, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. Daniel had a practice. Actually, the Psalms, Psalm 51 or 7, can't remember which one, I didn't have in my notes. It talks about praying day, morning, and evening. And so Daniel has a practice of praying 3 times a day. And he does it towards Jerusalem because he's longing for his homeland. He's longing to go back. He's longing for the flourishing of his people who have been exiled. And he has this practice, and it's a devoted practice, and it's a habit of his life. And so he's formed in it. And so when a law comes down that says you can no longer pray to God, what does Daniel do? He doesn't go hide in a closet, nor does he go and stand on the steps of King Darius's palace, probably ancient culture, right? His palace and say, I'm going to pray to my God. No, he just does what he's always done. He goes to his upper chamber, opens the doors to Jerusalem, and he prays because he's a man of discipline and habit, and it's a part of who he is. It's how he's been walking in his relationship with God through the many years that he's been there. And so these conspiring people, these enemies, they catch him. They see him. Got him. And it works. And so now he's brought to the king, and here's what they go on to say. Then these men came by agreement, there it is again, and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. They got him. They framed him. And it worked. And this king, what we see about King Darius is he's actually in this text a very foolish king. That he's listening to the advice of these men, that he is putting in laws that go contrary to what is his role as a king. See, he's forgotten his role. King Darius, whether because of pride or because of a desire to centralize his role in an expanding government, he foolishly listened to the high officials. And he forgets that he's a king, and he tries to function as a priest. He tries to become a receiver of the people's prayers. Or he at least within the ancient context, was placing himself as a mediator of the people's prayers to the gods. He was trying to serve in a priestly role, and that wasn't his role. That wasn't his office as king. And so King Darius, when he realizes what's happened, because he loved Daniel, remember, he was going to set him over the whole kingdom. He wanted Daniel. Daniel was his guy. He regrets his decision. He immediately regrets it when he discovers that Daniel is going to be thrown into the lion's den because of his law. He recognizes the foolishness of his decision in trying to play God or in trying to be a mediator to the gods. So what does he do? He labors to undo his failure. He does everything he can, but he's just not that powerful. He can't rescind this command. It doesn't work within the law of the land. There's a law that's above him as king, and it's the law of the Medes and the Persians, and he made it happen. He passed the law, but now he's bound to it. And so, and look at verse 14. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed, and he set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king. They know the king's working, trying to get Daniel free, and they say, know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. So the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. Okay, this is where the text kind of flips. Right now, we've been talking about humans, right? Man, Daniel, King Darius, the conspiring enemies. It's all been kind of down here. But now we see there's another character involved here. There's someone else working here. And King Darius is aware that he exists and that he's there and that he has a relationship with Daniel. And so what does King Darius say in verse 16? The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, may he deliver you. This word deliverance is going to pop up 3 times in the second half of this chapter. Because the story is shifting to the main question, to the main point, and to the main character of this story in the Bible. It's God. It's the God of Daniel. The question is God able to deliver Daniel from the lions? Darius poses the question, I hope your God's able to deliver you because I can't do anything else. He's done all he can. And the point of this text is that Daniel's God is a rescuing God. He is able to deliver his faithful man from the claws of death. Let's read the rest of the story. Verse 16, then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve, continually deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, has he been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones into pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. The question was, is God able to deliver Daniel? And the answer is a clear and resounding yes. He is able to overcome. He is able to deliver and to rescue. He is the living God. So, what's the application? If we buck the government, God will rescue us? Is that the promise in the text? The text doesn't teach this. It's a story of what happened to Daniel, not a promise of how God works in every earthly situation. However, where the encouragement is found, at least for the book's original readers, is that in this fact that God is able to deliver and rescue. Do you believe this, church? That God is able to deliver and rescue? That he reigns over all times and places, so you can trust him as you navigate the world of exile, even under the authoritarian regimes that oppose faith and holiness. That was the message that was being delivered to the Jews who were under these powers, and how they were being encouraged by the story of Daniel. But I'm only halfway through my message right now, because I need to recap this story for you. I need to tell it to you again. But this time, I'm going to generalize it, and I want you to hear the story of Daniel anew. A man is filled with an excellent spirit. His life is blameless, and he's gaining popularity. Jealous men conspire against him in order to put him to death. They find a way to arrest him while he's praying. They bring him to the ruler who tries everything he can to set the prisoner free, but to no avail. The man is thrown to the lions. Or if I was quoting a psalm, Psalm 22, it's a famous psalm. You might have heard about it. Jesus quoted it from the cross. It actually says, Psalm 22:21, "Save me from the mouth of the lions." A stone is then rolled over the den. And as the stone is then rolled away, the deliverance of God is on full display. I didn't mention the name of Daniel there because Daniel's story is a shadow. It's just a shadow, pointing us to a God who rescues and delivers, and a God who rescues and delivers in a way that no one expected, in a way that no one anticipated. Daniel's a shadow of something greater to come, a greater rescue, a greater deliverance that's coming down the pipeline. Think of the Bible as a 3D kind of pop-up book. All right, you know those books that you open up and then the characters pop out? Maybe just for this morning, think of Jesus Christ as the largest character in the pop-up book, right? So you open it up and Jesus is central in the book and his character rises to the top, and then let's say that there's a light coming from the full glory at the end of this journey, and it's casting a light back on the stories of the Bible, and Jesus is such a central figure in the middle that the light shines a shadow on everything that came before him. So every story you read in the Bible of the Old Testament, it's just basking in the shadow of the central character that is Jesus Christ. Because Jesus is the substance of the shadow. Hebrews uses this language. Jesus fulfills the Old Testament law. Jesus recapitulates the stories of Israel and his life. Jesus reigns as the Messianic King. Jesus answers the prophetic questions and prophecies, and Jesus relives the story of Daniel. Except he dies. Jesus isn't rescued. He's on the cross. Psalm 22, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because God is able to deliver and rescue, but there was something else going on when Jesus went to the cross. He was taking our place. He was bearing our punishment. He went to death. He was the blameless one who becomes sin and bears the wrath of God in our place. He's the one who's not delivered in the moment when he needed it most, and death overwhelms him. The lions are released on him, and he's brought to an end. I think sometimes we can jump to the resurrection a little too quickly. Like Good Friday, Holy Saturday, right? That day is really important. That day in between, because Jesus truly did die and suffer for our sin. And in this way, he shows why he's the substance and Daniel's just a shadow. But we also see in the story of the gospel that God is the rescuer. He is the God of deliverance. He is the God who rescues his faithful man. Yes, Jesus went into the grave, but Jesus is raised from the dead. He's alive. He was delivered. The stone is rolled away. Just like in the story of Daniel, and they're all wondering, all the disciples are wondering, was God able to deliver? And they meet Jesus face to face. It's a beautiful deliverance. His deliverance was not from the experience of death, because he did die. His deliverance was from the grip of death, the lion-like claws of death that had consumed him. And God is able to raise the dead. And Jesus' resurrection is the first fruits of our resurrection. So let me ask you the question again. If a Christian obeys God rather than men, will we be delivered? If we remain loyal to our God above men, and it causes opposition, and it causes suffering, and it causes a potential death, will we be delivered? The text in Daniel says that no kind of harm was found on him because he had trusted in his God. So if we trust in our God, if we remain faithful to our God, can we expect no harm to come to us? Will you and I who trust in God not be harmed? Will we be delivered from those who oppose us? And the answer is yes, maybe, and no. The answer is no, because we don't fall in the line of Daniel. We fall in the line of Jesus on the cross. No, you probably won't be delivered, and you will die, barring the return of Jesus Christ. We cannot expect earthly deliverance from ridicule, pain, and death. Jesus' way is a way of death. He said to his disciples, "Take up your cross and follow me." Christians are dying right now all over the world because of their faithful trust in God and allegiance to Jesus Christ. Martyrdom is more martyrs have gone to their death in the last century than the previous centuries combined. The persecution of God's people is picking up. There's been no progression over the journeys of history. Followers of Jesus are still hated and despised because their ultimate allegiance is to Jesus. There's a story, I'm sure you've heard of it. If you haven't, then I'd like to tell you this morning of a lady named Perpetua. She lived in the latter part of the 2nd century. She died in 203. She was a part of a baptism group. She was converted to Christianity, and she was going through training and catechism to be baptized. And they came and they took all the people who were in this group and they threw them in jail. And she was one of them, and she was a mother of a newborn baby. And her father came, who was a well-to-do guy, and he came and he entreated her. He said, "Can you please just deny that you're a Christian so that you can come back to us?" And she said, "Father, do you see this vase here? Could it be called by any other name than what it is?" And her father said, "No." And she said, "Well, neither can I be called anything other than what I am, a Christian." Her father continued and tried to entreat her, even accused her of pride and arrogance for not considering the family over her allegiance to Jesus Christ, to not consider her child who would not live when she died. And she said, "It will all happen in the prisoner's dock as God wills. For you may be sure that we are not left to ourselves, but are all in his power." Perpetua and Felicitas, one of her servants who also became a Christian, they were thrown to the wild beasts, gored by a wild heifer, attacked by a leopard, and then killed by a sword because of their allegiance to Jesus Christ. Where was their deliverance? Where was the rescuing God for them? He was there. He was there, and he told us this would happen. He called us to follow in the way of Jesus and the cross. Now, he can save, and that's why this is the maybe answer. There are many times when God has intervened on behalf of his people and delivered them. And they did not fall dead because of the powers and the conspiring people against them. Sometimes God does deliver and rescue for a time. And God has the power to do that whenever he so wills. But the ultimate answer is that yes, God will always deliver his people because of the resurrection. Yes, our journey might be that of Christ, where we die and then are raised to glory, but that is the ultimate deliverance. That is our eternal hope. That is everything for us. You and I will be delivered. Our resurrection hope is real and secure. Death does not get the last word. We don't fear death because we recognize an eternal future in the light of the victory won for us through Jesus Christ. Our calling is to, like Daniel, trust in God. And if we're talking eternity, we can say that no harm will come to us. Because when we do die, and it's potentially through the midst of a lot of harm, we'll stand before our God and we will be found blameless in the Son, Jesus Christ. And we will be welcomed as children of God into eternal glory. Our hope is so good. Turn your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 32. I'm sorry, we're going to end in chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, of David and of Samuel and the prophets who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. There's our Daniel reference. Quenched the powers of fire, probably Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Escaped the edge of the sword and were made strong out of weakness. Became mighty in war and put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, Since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. See, they were living in the shadow. We get to see the substance. We get to know how even their perfection was ultimately brought to completion through Jesus Christ. Keep reading chapter 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the author and the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Our pattern in life is to follow the way of Jesus, which is a way of suffering. It's a way into death. It's a way into sacrifice. It's a way into faithfulness. And so, church, how do we do this? Right now, we're not experiencing any kind of extreme persecution. Right now, we get to live in a country that has constantly defended religious liberty. We don't have to face the threats against that. But what is our calling? This is the calling to us, church. We need to lay aside every sin and weight that clings so closely, so that when it does come, will we be found as Daniel to be blameless, above reproach? Are we growing weary and faint-hearted? Are we forgetting that Jesus told us the way of following him is the way of suffering and sacrifice? Have we developed the habits that even Daniel had back in the day when he would pray 3 times a day? Do you have devotional habits of building your relationship with God, to God in sweet times of prayer? Because you have a real relationship with him? This whole way of life that he calls us into, it really depends on our decisions today and tomorrow. Are we walking in faithfulness and in holiness to our God? So often, I don't think the enemy needs to persecute us. He's got us distracted enough. Remember, the seed of the kingdom can be stopped by suffering, that was the second seed, or by the cares of this world that choke it out. And if we let the cares of this world, the distractions, the trivialities, if we let that choke out the seed of the kingdom, then we're not being faithful to God in a different sense. Maybe we all think we would stand up to a governing power who tells us to do something against the will of God, but we can't seem to tell that to our computer at home. We can't seem to find allegiance to God as a better option than the reigning power of sin and the flesh and the devil that are at war against us every single day. So let's be ready for the persecution, but let's walk in faithfulness now. Lay aside every sin and weight that clings so closely, because for the joy set before us, it's worth it. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? Would you just consider him? Consider Jesus, who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you might not grow weary and faint-hearted. Consider Jesus, who didn't have a place to lay his head. Consider Jesus, the poor one, the afflicted one, the suffering one. Consider Jesus so that you don't grow weary and faint-hearted. Consider Jesus, the resurrected one, who shows us the way. Jesus, we give you glory and praise this morning because you are risen. And you've invited us into the resurrection hope. Lord, please don't let us get distracted by sin and by weights that keep us from walking the pathway of the cross, that call us to take up our cross and to follow you, and that we would be a people, Lord, who know the ways of the Spirit, who are formed into the character of Christ. And so in walking in this way, we will be ready when the time comes, when we are pressed to do something contrary to our faith, to your holy calling on our lives. God, we need your strength today. I pray, Lord, that you would have mercy on us. We give you glory for your gift of yourself. We give you glory for the gift of righteousness. We give you glory for the gift of hope and of grace and of love. God, would you please have mercy on us? It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.